The subject today is human organization. And a few other aspects of that, such as behavior, which comes from perception or perceiving the environment. And a few other things of that kind, having to do with why the subject of this course is of interest to us, not just as technology people or science here or science there, but as individuals who are always asking the question when they hear a new idea, what's in this for me? The material follows from the predicting of all basic aspects of locomotion or movement on Earth. And the piece that was still left to cover during the preceding lecture was how this movement is evolving naturally toward greater access on an area. So that is the first problem that I begin today. It is movement of stuff, our stuff, ourselves, in the stuff, such as vehicles, on an area that has obviously two dimensions, L1 and L2. The area A is fixed. And so is the size of the things, all combined, the things that move on the area, that is also fixed. Now, moving is not a uniform flow of humanity. It is a non-uniform flow of humanity, described in the simplest as the coexistence of a few large movers, for example, one big truck of size M1, and which moves in one of the directions, and then numerous smaller vehicles of size M2 that move in the second direction. So the total amount of material that sweeps the area, this material M equals to M1 plus M2, is scanning the area with its movement. Now, the number N, the number of the small that correspond to one big mover, is at this stage not specified, but it is understandably greater than 1. So the question is there a configuration toward which this capital M flow system is evolving for greater access? The answer is, well, of course we'll be invoking the constructive law. The configuration has freedom to evolve. It has freedom to morph. Right away, we identify 2 degrees of freedom. One is the shape of the territory, and the other one is the relative size between the big and the small. So the challenge to the clairvoyant, which is to anticipate the direction of evolution, is to begin with identifying these gross, broad features of the organization. In this particular problem-solving opportunity, I place the discussion in terms of the amount of fuel that is required to move these n+1 masses on the area. So the total fuel required to move all these things is the topic of great concern. The total fuel, you may recall from the previous lecture, is, well, in the previous lecture we had concluded early on with the formula that the mass of the mover times the distance covered by the mover is proportional to a constant group called C1H over mu G. This factor is not crucial. And then the engine size to power alpha, and then the fuel load that's responsible for this movement as m sub f. So total fuel that we will be calculating very soon will have a scale that comes from this particular expression. In the previous lecture, we also showed that the engine mass scales with the total size of the mover, and that means that the total fuel, let's say, write it this way, that is responsible for moving stuff to the distance L, scales as capital M, the mass of the mover, to power 1 minus alpha. So that's the first move that we make. And now, analytically, the total fuel spent on A is the sum of two contributions, or two penalties if you want. One is to move M1 along L1, so that is M1 to this 1 minus alpha times L1 plus N times, because they get we have two N small movers, N times M2 to this power 1 minus alpha L2. Keep in mind that exponent alpha is a number of order 1, but less than 1. In my articles and books, I give examples of this alpha. It could be, in some cases, it's 1/2 or 2/3. A number of that approximate order of magnitude, which means that the exponent 1 minus alpha is itself of order 1 but less than 1. Okay, now this quantity is of course variable, because the dimensions L1, L2, M1 and M2 are varying. They're free to change. There are two constraints. They are listed here, and 4 minus 2 leave these 2 degrees of freedom. If you execute the minimization of this quantity with respect to these 2 degrees of freedom, methods for doing that we've illustrated in this course many times, the result, or the results, are actually 2. The first one, so the first result is that you discover the shape toward which this territory evolves. So a shape, that shape turns out to be L2 over L1 equals M2 over M1 to the power alpha. Well, obviously, so that's the first result. Let's comment a little bit. The first conclusion is that, because M2 is smaller than M1, the shape of the territory will not be square. It will be a rectangle, a slender rectangle. The smaller the small bodies are relative to the big. So a rectangle that's not very slender may be the patch of grass in your backyard, where the grass is filled with small movers and traversed long and fast by a few predators. On the other hand, in the birds and other scavengers that populate the immediate area relative to a highway, they coexist with the movers on the highway that produce the roadkill, and that would be an example of a much smaller ratio of L2 over L1. In any case, this is the first result, also memorized as short divided by long, belongs to small movers divided by big movers. So that's a qualitative conclusion worth remembering. The second conclusion that's derivable from this exercise, so that's the second conclusion, is that these two terms should be of the same size. In other words, we used to call this one the Roman 1 and Roman 2. So M1 should be the same as N and 2. This is known in some of my colleagues' terminology as the equipartition of size. It makes sense in the very special case where moving on the area is freight. So clearly, or maybe today's mail from the post office, clearly what is transported by the single vehicle is the same amount of stuff as all the letters and envelopes carried by hand by the driver of that vehicle to the right and to the left to deliver the correspondence to the various houses on the area. Anyway, so this is the second result, and that's pretty much the end of the exercise. There's still 1 degree of freedom left, which is this factor n. This is a third item that's discussed in a publication that I will share with you. So that is to be discussed, or to be considered. Really, it means to be exploited as a third degree of freedom in the predicting of the evolution of this flow configuration. Now, the main conclusion that we retain, which is an empowering conclusion, is that through freedom and this direction of evolutionary design, one arrives pretty much with pencil and paper on the back of an envelope to the natural emergence of hierarchy. This is the coexistence, or the living together, if you want, of few large movers with many small. Few large and many small. In biology, this mental viewing also goes by several metaphors. One is the food chain. There are other descriptions of this correct observation all over the languages of the planet. The point is that, meaning the point that comes from the exercise that I have on the blackboard is that that hierarchy means coexistence, means harmony. It means the architecture that empowers everybody on the area, the few large and the many small, to prosper together. The architecture is the result of everybody's wish to spend less on buying fuel, or if you want to spend less on producing food on the field, you know, grain and other things. So hierarchy is natural. The word natural means it happens. And even if you try to thwart it, it will happen again. You cannot stop it. If you try to defeat nature, you lose. So, hierarchy. Okay. More on this is obviously the object of this newest book of mine called Freedom and Evolution, Hierarchy in Science, Society, and Hierarchy in Nature, Society, and Science. Now, for those of you who remember how the course began, this little exercise is not entirely new. The course began with the example of the Atlanta airport, which was in fact the same drawing. A rectangular one with unknown shape in the beginning. So Atlanta airport. It was sketched this way: a length L and a transversal dimension H, on which human movement was organized the same way. In one mover, one big one, which was the train going from the arrival terminal all the way to Terminal E. These days it's called Terminal F. And then that was with a speed of movement called V1. And then several concourses on which people moved much more slowly with a speed V0. And from the minimizing of the total time of travel of one individual, or for that matter of all the individuals, and then then area averaged over A equals HL fixed, emerged the prediction. Turned out to be not only easy to get, but correct when compared with the actual design. The prediction that H over L, that is for greatest axis, should be equal to 2, and then V0 over V1, which is a shape with H over L less than 1, because this walking speed is significantly smaller than the train speed. So that was the result from the first lecture. You may recall from that derivation that there are two terms in the formula for the time spent. One was in the L direction, the other one, the time was the time of walking in the H direction. This shape is such that there is a balance between the time to ride and the time to walk. And so that's the connection with the past, and this is a very useful connection in education. I showed you here movement of freight in an area. It is important for you to see that the conclusion emerged previously, and from this coincidence, you can be sure that the conclusion will keep emerging if you go through life with your eyes open and question what about the organization of movement, for example, on the university campus, or the organization of movement not in two directions on an area, but in a volume, such as the pedestrian movement in a tall building. Now flex your brain muscles and you'll arrive rather fast to very, very pleasing flashes of light of G. You know, it's so simple. This is why there are many floors in the tall building and one or very few elevator shafts. The elevator shaft is the long and fast. The floors are like these concourses. They're two-dimensional concourses on which people walk. If you think that example is too esoteric, then you can think about something even more mundane, which is answering questions about the floor itself. How should it be organized? How many office doors or rooms on the same floor should be allocated to doors for toilets? This is a very important question, and the answer is always balance or harmony, also known as hierarchy. The restroom is the point where everybody converges. The other places are the peripheral, the offices, the cubicles. They belong to individuals, and the more numerous these alveoli of human existence on the surface, the less important each of one becomes. All right, so we have a hierarchy, we have a flash of thought from the past, and now a connection that to most of you will create a feeling of surprise. One way to describe this conclusion that just ended was that the material of total size m1 plus n times m2, all that material is moving on the area, just like these people in the airport, scanning the area. So the two-dimensional flow scans the area. Here's the area. It is scanned in the two directions, and the existence of the area, the evolutionary design of the area, is the result of this scanning becoming faster and faster, more and more effective. And that big conclusion is the introduction to my next example, which has to do with one aspect of animal locomotion that we did not discuss so far. Remember, animal locomotion is about moving on the landscape with less effort, that gives the walker the stride frequency and other such features of design in time called rhythm. But the mover, in fact, all the animals, especially those that have eye vision, is not moving blindly. The mover sees ahead. So you can call this kind of locomotion as guided locomotion. Guided by what? Or by whom? Never mind whom. It is self-guided in the sense that the mover perceives the environment and finds the open spaces, finds ways in which to avoid hitting the wall or hitting the trunk of the tree in front of it. So, guided locomotion depends on perceiving the environment or knowing ahead. Now, clearly, the mover that perceives what lies ahead, perceives it faster or farther, is more powerful than the mover who possesses myopic vision, you see. So, perceiving faster is the advantage. There are great stories from the Second World War, where and also the Korean War, where the fighter jets were in fact relatively close in design performance, but the field of vision available to the pilot differed from one design to another, and the perceiving of the theater of fighters, obviously dominated by enemies, varied from one pilot to his adversary, and the pilot who had a broader field of vision, or for that matter, a better designed windshield, if you want, or maybe a able-bodied co-pilot with 20/20 vision. That cockpit had the advantage. So not all either animals are equally strong when it comes to seeing ahead. So what are they seeing in order to be able to proceed forward with confidence, without stopping and touching the twigs in front of their noses? Well, they're seeing images, and the images are similar to the Atlanta airport. They're not as simply shaped. They are known as the binocular field of vision, but in a poor man's drawing, it is once again a rectangular page, the page on which the image fits, and that the page has two dimensions and a fixed size. The fixed size, we'll see a little bit later, has to do with the length scale of the field of vision. So this is the image to be scanned. Now, the scanning in the design of vision is due to quick, violent bursts of movement called saccade. Saccade means severe jolts in movement, and they are happening very, very frequently in humans. A few milliseconds. And these saccades are responsible for scanning the field in both directions, in this direction and in this direction. And so, using the same analysis as the one that we had for the Atlanta airport, we can estimate the time it takes to scan this page with the two eyes in both directions. There will be a time to scan longitudinally and a time to scan transversely. Clearly the formula then becomes L over the speed of scanning longitudinally plus h order of magnitude. We're doing scale analysis here. Transversal dimension divided by the speed of scanning in the transversal direction. So that's VL. This is VH. However, since the area is fixed, then H is equal to A over L. And that means that here you put A over L. You arrive immediately at the competition between the first term and the second term. We call them many times Roman 1 and Roman 2. Two terms that compete with respect to changes in L. L now is the only degree of freedom about the shape of this area. Roman 1 is a rising line. Roman 2 is a descending equilateral hyperbola. The sum of the two is the quantity of interest, which is the total time. And so, the first conclusion we reach is that fastest scanning, or for that matter, easiest or most rapid perceiving and understanding of what lies ahead. By the way, this is true about reading any text. It's about understanding any lesson in the classroom, being happy about the image that you see on your computer screen, that is also rectangular with a shape. The first conclusion is that Roman 1 equals Roman 2, which means that the time to scan horizontally is the same as the time to scan vertically. And from this particular equivalence of the two terms results the shape of the territory, which is L over H. We can do the details. L over H is the same as VL over VH. So that's the shape. And it would be the answer to the exercise. It is a correct answer in the more general sense, because at this stage, VL and VH are any. They are not determined. They are not determined. Now, the next movement in this piece of music is to ask the next question, which is, what are these two speeds in a case of two-eyed vision? Well, I already told you that this is a poor man's sketch of the binocular field of vision. You see this, by the way, when you look through binoculars. And by the way, each eye perceives a field that has a characteristic radius that has to do with the design of the eye. I call it R. And then superimposed on that in the image that lands on the brain is what the right eye contributes, which is a similar field of vision. So that's the binocular field of vision. Now, during 1 second, so fix the time interval. The length scale traveled vertically is the diameter, which is 2r. The length scale swept horizontally is 1, 2, 3, 3r. And that means that the speed, this is for the fixed time interval delta t. The speed VL is 3r over delta t, and the speed VH is 2r over delta t. Meaning that this ratio of VL over VH is of the order of 3 over 2. Obviously, something, well, it's equal to 1.1, okay, just for the next point that I'm going to make, but greater than 1. This happens to be the shape that I drew here, and it is the shape that the evidence suggests is preferred by all animals, not just people. Now, people, of course, make the point every day by carrying in their wallets credit cards that are shaped this way, or train tickets and airplane tickets that are shaped this way. Of course, I mentioned the computer screen, by the way, even before that, the cinema screen, but even before that, the shapes of paragraphs on the page, and even better, the shapes of figures on a page, inserted on a page, the shapes of captions on a page. They're all this way because of the design of the two eyes. The two eyes, and this is true of most animals as well, the two eyes for terrestrials and for flyers are positioned on the horizontal. Why? Because the image available to these movers is the horizon. The world is flat in the first and easiest and oldest description. You see that? So that's an important result. So from this little exercise, we conclude that the image shaped this way is the one that's scanned by two eyes the fastest, which means it is perceived, it is understood, meaning it is not only more useful, but it is the most empowering for the mover that proceeds on a landscape with a guided locomotion. So this concept, or this feature of human design in this case, is the precursor to much more recent developments that have improved on this design. I'm talking about radar, GPS, or in the case of aquatic movement, the periscope, and the sonar, and all these other things that have to do with scanning an area before the mover ventures in, scanning the territory. It could be a volume, as in the case of the ocean, before the mover ventures into that unknown territory. Finally, for those of you who like to read science fiction, we have here the coincidence that this shape that came to us from the constructor law and pencil and paper has a value of around 1.5, which happens to be comparable with a very famous number in geometry, which is 1.618, and then an infinite number of digits, because this is an irrational number known as the golden ratio. Also known, even before the golden ratio, as the divine proportion. Now, it was named this way. By the way, the number itself has to do with Euclidean geometry, but why it became important during the Renaissance is that the artists of the Renaissance and the architects observed that facades and paintings and other features of graphic art were obviously more pleasing than other features if they were shaped this way. How did they know that they were more pleasing? Well, they knew from the fact that they kept appearing everywhere. In fact, to contest this discovery from the past, you can test it yourselves. You can walk into any art gallery and you'll see hanging on the walls paintings, meaning frames of paintings of not exactly the same size, all of them, but the great majority have a size that's comparable, meaning a shape that's comparable with this shape. And so the coincidence that the shape is preferred, and it's obviously more beautiful, meaning it's proportioned. From this, the use of the word proportion to describe an appealing human face, a human face that's not dominated by one feature out of control, like a huge nose, or some other feature like that makes the image memorable for just one feature. In the class of designs that human preference has shown to be more pleasing and more attractive are these. And because there was no science back then, as was always the case, if for lack of a scientific explanation, the occurring phenomenon, which in this case was the human preference, was attributed to an act of God. So you see here the role that the religion has played in not only human thought, but in this evolutionary process of empowering the living. Remember, the person with guided locomotion is more powerful than the blind mover. And so religion had this first, let's call it, act of empowerment by drawing people's attention to the fact that some shapes are more pleasing than others, which is why they keep occurring. But of course, if you're in the business of say architecture, or creating an edifice that's supposed to please the emperor, and on and on and on, then you're more powerful to know ahead of time how to shape it. Now, these days, we know the physics, or in this case, the very simple mechanics basis for the human preference for this kind of shape. It has to do with access, understanding the environment so that you can move into it safely, access, and that shows that after this religion-based explanation came the science version in time. It does show that, that, of course, religion is a precursor to science, but it does draw attention to the fact that both emerged in the human thought out of this urge to understand the environment better and make better use of it. So these are the two ideas that I want to put together in front of you in this concluding lecture. And there's a good sandwich of ideas because it shows the breadth of the course. We spent a lot of time going through the topics of the textbook. Many of those had to do with predicting flow architectures that have use in obviously in the technology, but also in understanding why flow configurations occur in nature, river basins, and many examples, trees, vegetation that we encountered along the way. But in this concluding lecture, we came home to why all this power to predict is important. It is important because it is useful. To know ahead of time what is going to hit you is good for you. Good for you. And this is why over time people have become, well, obviously not necessarily smarter, because for that one depends on the parents who gives us birth, but how with the study and with education and with freedom to question, we all get better at moving through life. So with that, I thank you for your attention.